Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about why your boundaries aren't working. This is one of the most frustrating things for parents who are truly trying to use healthy relationship tools to guide and direct their teenager and then end up in even more frustrating experience than if they had just used the harsher controls and consequences that they grew up with. So I want to let you know it is okay to feel so frustrated by this, and I admire and respect your courage for wanting to try something different than perhaps how you were raised, knowing that it didn't work for you and knowing there's a better way, but you just can't quite seem to land on it. It's all good. This one is for you. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, one of only 70 people in Canada to hold both designations. I have been working with parents of teens and tweens for the last 16 years to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blowups, and stressful silences and build healthy relationships based on trust and respect. I was a very troubled teen, so I speak from personal experience. Spent decades in therapy, and I've also raised 2 children, 2.5, some other people's kids, some friends' kids too. And I'm sharing from what I've learned and also what I know to be true. It is science and research based. All right, so let's talk about cell phone use, shall we? Because this is a big one that came up with a parent the other day, and I wanted to share this with you. So this is about time to get off their phone. Okay, so let's just imagine your teenager has a cell phone, and what time do you want them to get off their phone at night, which feels like a reasonable time? And I am not here to judge the time. I don't care. There is no magical book of what time. I'm just going to use some examples, and you can fill in what feels right in your values, etc. Now, first of all, we need to define what a boundary is and what it's not. So let's do that. A boundary is never and has never been intended to control. Nope, that's not a boundary. A boundary is not, I say jump, you say how high. That is an expectation. You see, anything that requires immediate compliance or high levels of monitoring, that's an expectation. It's not a boundary. An expectation is where you are projecting what you want on someone else, and it requires them to be, do, say the way you want them to, or you get super pissed and frustrated, maybe even full of anger and rage, and they always feel like a judgment, like they're being judged or a failure because they're never going to get it right. That's not a boundary. A boundary starts with you, not your teenager. Mind blown, right? A boundary starts with you, because a boundary is about a communication of what works for you and what doesn't, relative to feeling respected, not being in control. Because you see, that's what we were taught. We were taught that being in control and compliance is respect. It's actually not. Respect, you can feel respected without anybody else around you changing, because your experience is yours, not theirs. Okay, so a boundary is about you deciding what feels respectful and really doing the work to understand why. And this is the work I do with parents in all of my programs. It's a whole flow of a worksheet of what is it that you say you want? Why is this important to you? What is the key to this? Is it because that's just the way it was? That's the way you were raised. That's what you were taught. Start to really get below, why is this important to you? And is it really about respect, or is it just about feeling safe? Because it's not your teenager's responsibility for you to feel safe. It's not your teenager's responsibility to take care of your anxieties and fears. Nope, never was, never will be. I'm sorry if that's a disappointment for you. A boundary about the cell phone at night. Okay, so let's say you have a 16-year-old. I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say you have a 16-year-old and you've decided that 11 p.m. is when phones are going to be off. Now, I will say this. Teenage circadian rhythm flips up to 2 hours because of the adolescent brain development. So if your teenager used to go to bed or to sleep at like 10 o'clock at night, it may be very difficult for them to fall asleep before midnight. And that's not because they're being irresponsible. It's because their brain does not get the increased levels of melatonin, which naturally lowers your heart rate, increases body temperature, and helps your organs start to go to sleep so you can go to sleep. That's not their fault. Nope, not. Now, that doesn't mean they need to have access to the internet until midnight either. Whatever feels right for you. I'm not here to judge on that. So you have a 16-year-old and you want them off their phone by 11 p.m. Now, a boundary is not about control. Remember I said that? A boundary is a healthy relational tool. It is an emotional currency at a relational level. It is not a behavioral control tool. It is not a commanding thing. That's not how a boundary works. So a boundary done well looks like a little bit of conversation and negotiation with your teenager. Let me be very clear with you. This is not about abdicating your authority as a parent and giving it to your teenager. That's not what I'm saying. If you came from a control authoritarian environment, then you may feel, you tell your teenager it's 11 o'clock and it's 11 o'clock whether they like it or not, and too bad for them, and that phone is mine, and maybe even you sit in their room and just go through their phone because you can, because you pay for it. That's authoritarian. It requires ultimate accountability for behavior, but has almost little to no room for or awareness of the emotions that drive that behavior, which is why it ultimately doesn't work in the end. It creates more defiance, more disrespect, and really erodes trust, respect, and connection very quickly. But if that's how you were raised, that probably feels normal, right? Okay, so you want 11 o'clock, okay? So you know you want to do this differently. You're like, okay, I want to do this different. I want to have more connection with my teen. I don't want to have these big blow-ups and all these arguments. So I'm going to try and go to my teen and we're going to discuss this, okay? Boundaries always have a bit of a gray area. You need to do the work to find out what respect is to you and what your bottom line is. Like what's your, no, I don't go past that line. And what's the little bit of gray area that you're willing to negotiate within? Because remember, boundaries are a relational tool. It's a relational tool. It's not a command thing, okay? So you go to your teen and you say, I would like you to get off your phone by 11 o'clock at night, okay? Let's just say that. And they're like, nah, that's so dumb. Like my friends are all online then, and that's when I'm finally done my homework and I want to start, I want to talk to some of my friends or game with them or whatever. Okay. In an authoritarian old style, you would say, well, that's too bad. Suck it up, sunshine. Give me your phone and that's it. We're done. Don't talk back to me. Don't you dare talk back to me. Like there's just no room for anything. Okay. And you don't want to do that. So in aiming for a boundary, this is natural and normal, by the way. What you end up doing is having this conversation with your teen and they give you the same response. And you're like, well, okay, but I don't want you to be up that late and it's not healthy. Like I want you to get enough sleep and I want to promote, a healthy balance for you. So, all right, we'll say 11 and let's see how it goes. Okay. So sure enough, you go in their phone, you go in their room at say 11:15 and you're like, you're not off your phone. Like we agreed at 11 and you're still on your phone. And they're like, I know because I'm on with my friends or whatever. Like this is dumb. And you keep trying to negotiate with them. And you keep trying to negotiate with them because you're trying to use a healthy relational tool to change your relationship dynamic to connection and respect. And what ends up happening is in this constant negotiation circle, your teenager is continually going past 11 p.m., for example, you're probably feeling really resentful. You're feeling unheard. And now you're starting to get ragey and angry. Like, because you're not feeling heard. You're not feeling respected. But because you want to do this different, you maintain this negotiation, quote, air quotes, negotiation. What happens is you've crossed the line past a boundary, and you're now in permissive parenting, which is where your child has no accountability for behavior because you're trying desperately to emotionally connect with them. And this is a normal pendulum swing. When you've been raised in an authoritarian environment with absolute compliance and accountability for behavior, no wiggle room, but almost no acknowledgement of the emotional intelligence or emotional expression that is the source of all that behavior, that you go kind of the other way, where there's not enough accountability for behavior because you're trying so desperately to allow for this emotional soup that you are really doing your best to swim in and include in your parenting and in your relationship with your teen. And bless you for even wanting to, because it's not easy. It's doable. It's not easy, okay? So you go from authoritarian to permissive, and you're stuck in this constant every night, you go to your teen. Okay, we agreed on 11 o'clock. You're going to be off your phone by 11, right? And they're like, yeah, I'll be off by 11. And then every single night you go on their phone at 11, or you go on your internet app, or you go into their room and they're still on their phone at 11:15, 11:20, 11:30. And you're like, come on, we agreed. Now you're begging and pleading. See, permissive parenting does abdicate. It gives up your normal and healthy influence and authority as a parent, and you're handing it over to your teen. So now, like, there's no accountability at all. Now, authoritarian parenting would say, that's it, your phone is mine and you're grounded and I'm taking this phone for a week, because there is such absolute requirement for compliance that in the face of that one misstep, there is severe and harsh punishment where your teenager is going to know what you meant, and they're going to know right now, which is what builds shame, disconnection, disrespect, and erodes the things you're trying to build. And permissive parenting is where you literally are handing over your authority, trying to swim in the emotional soup, but you're not creating accountability. Here's why this is why boundaries don't work. Neither one of those works in the long run. And this has been research-based. What you're aiming for, what I truly believe you are aiming for, but we are not taught. And not being taught means we only understand extremes, authoritarian or permissive. And actually both are based on fear. Authoritarian parenting is based on fear of losing control. Permissive parenting is based on the fear that your teenager won't like you, or they'll be angry with you, or conflict. So authoritarian is fear, and I must have absolute control over all behavior at all times, because I'm afraid if I lose control, all hell will break loose. And permissive parenting is I'm afraid they're not going to like me. So neither one works. But it's normal to swing between this pendulum, because the middle ground is called authoritative parenting. Authoritative parenting requires a reasonable level of accountability for behavior, and it allows for the emotional connection and exploration of the emotions that drive the behavior, also scientifically proven. So that your boundary isn't working because either you are authoritarian, expecting absolute compliance, which your teenager's never going to do. They're going to be like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Because they don't feel respected as an autonomous human being who might have an opinion and thoughts and feelings about things. They feel totally disrespected. They feel like they're being treated like a child. And then if they don't do it the way you want it, they're being harshly and like unreasonably reprimanded. Okay? So they just get more defiant. And yet permissive parenting, they get away with everything. So they lose respect for you there too. So do you get what I'm saying? Authoritarian parenting and permissive parenting both come from fear. But your teenager's experience of them is the same. Authoritarian parenting, they lose respect for you because you think you own them and everything in their life. You think you own them and can literally, at a whim, say jump, and they have to say how high. So they give you one of these, you pick. Permissive parenting, they also lose respect for you because you don't hold the boundaries that in fact their brain requires, and emotionally, as they are learning about healthy relationship dynamics, boundaries build healthy respect because both parties feel heard and seen, even if they don't totally agree. Okay? So, the middle line is authoritative parenting. So let's go back to the example of your teenager with the phone and you want them to get off the phone at 11 o'clock at night, okay? So you can say to your teen, and you don't set a boundary. A boundary comes from response, from a calm, regulated brain, not from an unregulated, reactive, angry. That doesn't happen. So you don't set boundaries in the heat of a moment. That is never a good time because that's not a boundary. Promise you. You set a boundary when things are calmer. So you could say at dinner time or when you're driving to activities or something. You can say, hey, look, I don't want to keep going through this thing with you at night about your cell phone. It's exhausting. I love you. And I don't want to keep doing this with you. Can we come to an agreement? That is essentially what a boundary is, because a boundary is the closest point at which you both feel loved and respected yourself, by yourself, and for the other. Now that might mean you are standing on two different sides of the Grand Canyon, and that's as close as you're going to get. And that does suck. And because it very rarely, and only in movies, is it going to be that you're both dancing on the head of a pin and you're both like, wee, this is amazing. It just doesn't happen. Okay? So you say to your teen in a calm state, not in the moment, I want to come to an agreement with you about your phone at night and what I feel like is supporting a healthy balance, great sleep, and you get to connect with your friends. And I don't have to keep doing this monitoring thing with you. Like, let's just not do that. Now, teenagers do lack self-regulation. They struggle with that. That's a function of their brain, and their cell phones feed right into it. That's not their fault. It doesn't make them irresponsible and lazy. It means that their brain is working the way it's supposed to, and so is the cell phone. It's their problem. It's not their fault. So you might say, I have tried trusting you that you're going to turn it off at 11 o'clock at night. But my experience is I've been going into your room at night and you're still on your phone. Because I don't want to be like an asshat parent that's like, that's it, you're done, and I'm taking your phone. I don't want to do that either. So can we just come to an agreement where I feel loved and respected and you feel loved and respected, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable for both of us? Can we just do that? Like, treat them like an autonomous. They're becoming an adult. So they say, well, 11 o'clock is frustrating for me because my friends are online. I want to talk to my boyfriend, my girlfriend. I want to do gaming, and I'm not tired at 11 o'clock at night, so I don't want to get off my phone. Okay. Those are fair and real points. Listen. Validate. Validation and empathy does not require you to agree. And remember, you are not in power here, okay? So okay, I get it. Your friends are up at that time of night. You're not tired. And so you're finished your homework and, or your activities, and you just want to chill out and be on your phone. Okay, I get that. I know that science says your brain doesn't get tired until up to 2 hours later than it used to. So I understand that. I also know that the teen brain needs sleep more than ever. And getting up in the mornings for school is ridiculously hard for you because your brain actually needs to sleep later, go to bed later, and get up later, but school doesn't allow you to do that. So every day in the week, you just get more and more tired. Not because of any fault of your own. It's part of the adolescent brain development. I don't believe it would be right for me as a parent to let you be on your phone all night long. I'm sure it would be fun, and maybe on a weekend, but on a school night, I feel like 11, now let's say we're dealing with a 16-year-old, right? I feel like 11 o'clock is pretty reasonable. And I want to trust you with 11 and not have to check in on you all the time. I don't want to have to do that. What if we say 11:15 and we'll start with that? And they are going to say to you, well, that's still stupid and that's dumb. What else am I supposed to do? And I don't want to go to sleep then and I can't. And you validate. Yeah, this is frustrating for you. I can hear that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the free app from our internet service provider to turn the Wi-Fi access off to your phone by 11:15. And or you may use certain software like Youre Pact. It's non-invasive software to turn off access to certain apps by that time at night, or maybe it's a screen time app that you set a password for, and the certain apps just turn off by 11:15 at night, and that's it. They can have access to their music or maybe a meditation app or a calming app, something like that. They're not going to like it. And you're probably not going to like it because you would actually prefer if they were off their phone by 10:30 or 10 o'clock even, because you're tired by 10 and you don't understand why they're staying up so late. But you see, again, science, we have to anchor ourselves in the science. Your teenager's not being irresponsible. Their brain does not get tired early anymore for at least 3 years, 4 years, okay? That's a boundary. You are being respectful of what is true and right for them, and you are sharing what is true and right for you, and you are not abdicating your authority to go to permissive, and you are not demanding by being authoritarian. And you are saying to them, okay, this is going to be the boundary. We're going to try this, and we're going to revisit it like every week. Because a boundary is a relational tool. It's not what you think is best and right, and therefore that's what is. Boundaries need to consistently be revisited. Boundaries will need to consistently be recommunicated. A boundary is your responsibility because it is about you feeling respected. It is not your teenager's responsibility to just know it. You own your boundaries. Your teenager does not. Your teenager is learning to own their own boundaries. So you revisit this every single week. You would have to check with a medical professional about taking melatonin. There are actually other things that I think are better. L-theanine, I believe, is much better than melatonin, but it doesn't always work. My oldest has autism and ADHD, and for a couple of years, he literally could not get to sleep before midnight. Not because he wasn't trying. He had healthy sleep techniques. He did breathing exercises. He did stretching exercises. He had meditation apps. Because of his brain physiology, his busy brain, he just could not get to sleep before midnight. That's not his fault. He was doing the best he could. Yes, that's what those apps are for, is shutting off the data. Youre Pact, Bark Technologies. You could use Life 360. I'm not as much of a fan. I prefer Bark. You can use the Screen Time app it turns off access to apps. It doesn't matter if they have data or Wi-Fi. Yes. But you don't do this without a very transparent conversation where you allow your teenager to share what is true and right for them, and you honor and validate that, not diminish and deny it. Boundaries build respect. You will not build respect by not allowing your teen to be part of the conversation. You will not build respect if you command and don't listen to them, and you will not build respect if you keep letting your teen try and set the boundary and then get mad at them because they're not doing it. That's permissive. We're aiming for the middle ground, which is called authoritative, which requires a reasonable level of accountability for behavior and allows for a reasonable level of emotional intelligence and expression that drives the behavior. Okay, so after a week, your teen might be really pissed because maybe they were on a conversation with their boyfriend or girlfriend at 11:15 and their phone turned off and they have no way of connecting again. They might be really angry. And it's okay for them to be really angry. If you were on a conversation with your friend and it cut off, you might be mad too. So the next morning they come to you and go, "This is so stupid. I was in the middle of a really important conversation with so-and-so and my phone just cut off because of your stupid rules." That would be really frustrating. I imagine that was really frustrating. And yes, I can see how angry and upset you are. I remember us having this conversation and coming to the agreement of 11:15, even though I know you don't like it. So if you know that your phone is going to turn off at 11:15, you might be well served to start wrapping conversations up by 10 after 11. And I understand that this feels really frustrating for you. And that's it. But you have empathized and validated. And then you keep checking in. Now, some teenagers I get where they have the boundary of 11:30 and they are learning to self-regulate and consistently are off their phones by about 11 because they're learning to self-regulate. Just because your teen brain is not an adult brain, period. Look it up, it's science. Your teen brain is not an adult brain. So expecting them to have the same level of prioritization of time management that you do is unrealistic, and that will tank your relationship as a whole. Okay, so this is the thing about them going past the agreed upon time. If you have an app set for it, they can't go past the agreed upon time, can they? They can't. If they go past the agreed upon time, then you go back to the conversation. I'm pretty sure we had this conversation about ending at 11:15. I noticed that you were still on your phone at 11:30. Tell me what happened. I was in this conversation. My friend had just broken up with their boyfriend or girlfriend and they reached out to me and I felt really bad and I didn't want to get off the phone because they were really upset. You can be like, wow, yeah. You know what? You're an amazing friend. You're an amazing friend that you were there for them. I would like us to stick with the 11:15 like we agreed upon. And maybe next time you let them know that you have to be off your phone by 11:15. Would that work for you? You see, if you're more concerned about setting a consequence or punishment when they don't follow your boundary, that is authoritarian thinking. Because that is triggering your fear that you might not be in control. The moment parents ask me, but what if they don't do it? What if they don't do it? I don't even get the word boundary out of my mouth. And they're like, but what if they don't do it? That's authoritarian thinking. Authoritative, it is a conversation. You are in a relationship with a different autonomous person. Okay? So first of all, if you use an app, they can't go past the time. There's no going past the time. And if they do go past the time, you compassionately and curiously have a conversation with them first because you don't know why. Maybe they were being an amazing friend. Maybe their friend was deciding that they were going to, do something awful or, whatever. And they were like, oh my gosh, and they didn't want to hang up. Find out first. Don't assume. Okay. It doesn't only work if you turn off the app. This is about helping them learn to self-regulate. Then maybe after a week when you're checking in with them and saying, okay, so how are you feeling about this? And they're like, yeah, I don't love it, but I noticed that I'm getting to sleep earlier and that feels good. You can be like, okay, why don't we try it now for a bit without the restrictions, without the screen time or app restrictions. Let's try it for a bit and see how that works for you. We're still saying 11:15, but let's try it now where you're in charge. Because I want you to know that I know you're becoming an adult and you're learning to adult, and I want you to have that control. That control. Now your teenager won't always get it right. Because if you think they're always going to get it right, you, my friend, are expecting perfection from them. And until you are perfect, they're not going to be perfect either. They have a learning brain, not a perfect brain. They don't even have an adult brain yet. Okay? So then you take the restrictions off, and then at some point, okay, and then they learn to self-regulate. They're not going to get it perfect. Some nights they're going to go over by 5 minutes because they were on a conversation with a friend. Some nights they're going to put it down early and you're like, oh, that's amazing. It's not about pointing out when they didn't get it right or perfect. That's authoritarian parenting, which only points out faults and uses criticism and leverages fear for them to change behavior. That is messed up and has been proven to create significant trauma. Please don't do it. Instead, you say to them, I'm on every night where they get it right. You're like, you know what? I'm really proud of you. I know this isn't easy. I get stuck on my cell phone too. And all of a sudden, shoot, I'm like an hour deep in TikTok and I should have been off my phone like half an hour ago. I do it too. And I know it's hard. Let's try again. And then you keep trying again. And when they get it right, you're like, you know what? I see you were off your phone early last night. Like, good for you. I'm really proud of you. How are you feeling today? You want to promote that it's about getting good sleep and having life balance and that talking to friends not all night long, okay? And if your teenager's struggling with that level of self-regulation, which some personalities do, not bad kids, not weak and irresponsible and lazy kids, can we please stop with the labeling already now? My oldest with ADHD and autism, he was hyper-vigilant with self-regulation. Hyper-vigilant. That's how his brain works. He took himself off Instagram when he felt he was spending too much time on it. Whereas my youngest has a very different brain. He struggles with self-regulation just like I do. So we use the screen time app on his phone, and he is now away at university, and while he's at university, he asks me to set the screen time password that he doesn't know because he knows that will help him stay focused. And when he gets home after a semester in the summer or at Christmas, he asks me to take the password off. This is teaching regulation, and everyone's brain doesn't do it the same, okay? Yes. And it's okay to, this is what my point about, this is why your boundaries aren't working, because you're either trying it from an authoritarian perspective, which is that fear of needing to be in control because somehow that's related to respect or morality, which is all bullshit. The whole thing, science, it's all been proven. It's all bullshit. Okay. Compliance is not respect. Control is not a better parent. So just let's move off that. And then, so we go to the other extreme, which is permissive parenting, where you now are giving up your authority to your teen and then getting really resentful and mad at them when they're not being the way you want them to be, but you're trying to be nice, still based in fear because you want them to like you. And you don't want to do the other way. Do you see what I'm doing? Like go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's exhausting. Boundaries work because they are intended from authoritative parenting. It's a messy, harder process because number one, you are not in high levels of control. You are the parent. The buck stops with you. But you are giving up some of that control and taking your own responsibility for your own fear and anxiety of feeling out of control. That's your responsibility. Never was your teenagers. And from the permissive part, you're taking acknowledgement that they are an autonomous human being, not a robot to be controlled or programmed, and they might have their own say in what they believe and what they think. And you're mixing the two together, and it takes consistent revisiting, conversation, listening, not lecturing, to find out where they stand and constantly be in the process of finding the closest point where you both feel loved and respected. That is why boundaries build respect. Because when your teenager feels heard, now maybe you go back to using the apps that shut their phone down because they're not doing well with self-regulation. Does that mean they're failing? Does that mean you're going to constantly point out that they're just like, you can't trust them and they're failing? No. You're like, yeah, you know what? I'm really proud of you for working within these restrictions. Like, I mean, it still must suck and be hard for you. And I'm really proud that you honor and acknowledge that and that you're just doing great within it. Or if you've got the child who does self-regulate really well, you're like, man, like that's amazing. Can we find right in what they're doing first and not always crap all over them when they don't get it perfectly? Because again, unless you are perfect. If you want to know more about boundaries, you want the exact scripts, the worksheet of how to set a boundary and determine, are you actually seeking respect? Because that's what a boundary is. Or are you seeking control? And if you want my compassionate consequence formula, it's a whole flow chart. What happens if they are consistently busting through boundaries? How do you stay in that authoritative middle ground when they keep busting through your boundaries and not go to control and punishment or permissiveness where they just get away with everything? My compassionate consequence formula is all about how to walk through the process of broken boundaries and use reasonable and relative consequences to actually create lasting behavior change while connecting with your teen, not eroding trust, respect, and connection. My Become a Boundaries Boss program is a detailed online course where I've got videos and worksheets and then supplemental resources for you to really truly understand what boundaries are, not what you were taught they were, what science says they are, and how to specifically implement them in your relationship with your teen so that you don't feel so resentful or ragey all the time, and they aren't always defiant and talking back and just giving you a giant screw you. You can just not be so exhausted all the time because you're not in this constant consequence cycle that's not actually changing anything anyway. And in fact, when you're in a constant consequence cycle, what you're actually looking for is what they're doing wrong. And if you're constantly focused on what they're doing wrong, it's already not working, because healthy boundaries are less exhausting and you need less consequences and you have more opportunity to point out what they're doing well and what they're learning. If you're interested in my Become a Boundaries Boss program, you can find it on my website, alipayne.com, under the programs menu, or if you're here on YouTube, I will post the link below. I want to thank you so much for joining me today on why your boundaries are not working. And if you're here on Instagram, I'd love a follow. Share this with your partner, with your co-parent, with parents of teens in your circle who are feeling this same pressure and exhaustion of trying to get it right and desperately wanting to, but stuck in this pendulum of extremes because they also don't know, because we're not taught this effective, scientifically backed middle ground. Thanks so much for joining me today. Again, my name is Ali Payne. You can find me at alipayne.com, on Instagram and TikTok at Ali Payne, or here on YouTube, Ali Payne. Thanks, everybody. Bye.